January 17, 1940. A bitter wind sweeps across the frostbitten plains of northern France. The ground is scarred, pocked with shell craters, and the distant rumble of engines vibrates through the icy air. Amid the skeletal trees lining the road, a lone Allied gunner crouches behind the steel breastwork of his anti-tank emplacement. His breath forms thin clouds, his hands numb on the cold, worn metal of the gun. In the distance, dark silhouettes roll forward, a German Panzer formation, engines growling, treads tearing at the frozen earth. Smoke and exhaust mingle in a gray haze, blotting out the morning sun. Every soldier nearby holds their breath, hearts hammering against the weight of inevitability. The gunner's eyes trace the lead tank, noting every glint of sunlight on its armor, every hesitation in its advance. One thought burns in his mind. The enemy must be stopped, or this narrow corridor will be lost, and with it, hundreds of lives. A single spark, a single strike could ignite chaos. And today that spark will come not from the heavens, but from the hands of one resolute gunner. The stage is set, the enemy is near, and a battlefield decision is about to change the course of this engagement. By early 1940, the war in Western Europe had settled into a tense, frozen stalemate. After Germany's lightning invasion of Poland the previous September, French and British forces had rushed to fortify the Maginot Line, while German troops reorganized for a wider campaign. In northern France, near the Somme and Aisne rivers, small towns and farmland became the stage for an impending confrontation. The Germans, confident in their Panzer divisions, were testing Allied defenses with probing maneuvers and armored reconnaissance. The Allies, still adapting to the new reality of mechanized warfare, relied on a mix of fixed artillery, hastily dug anti-tank positions, and small infantry saws. I-units spread across vulnerable gaps. On the morning of January 17th, a column of German tanks, comprising Panzer IIIs and IVs, moved cautiously along a frozen country road, their commanders calculating the angles of approach and artillery cover. Allied observers reported the movement, alerting nearby units, but the terrain favored the armored advance. Snow-covered fields offered little concealment for defensive positions, while the dense clusters of trees along the road provided both an obstacle and an opportunity. The gunner stationed at a narrow choke point had only a few options: hold his fire until the optimal moment or risk exposing his position too early. Each tank in the approaching formation was equipped with reinforced armor, capable of withstanding standard anti-tank rounds, making the task of stopping them daunting. Morale among the Allied troops was fragile. Reports of German speed and precision in Poland had traveled quickly across the front, sowing fear and hesitation. Yet discipline remained, and each soldier knew that inaction could mean catastrophe. The gunner's position, though isolated, became a pivotal point, a thin line between the unstoppable advance of the German machine and the fragile hope of Allied resistance. Every decision here carried consequences far beyond the frozen field, shaping the flow of the battle that would unfold in the hours ahead. The enemy was near, the tension palpable, and the moment for action was creeping closer. Beyond the immediate battlefield, the broader context of early 1940 framed every movement. Allied supply lines were stretched thin, reliant on rail and narrow country roads frozen by winter. Ammunition and fuel were rationed carefully, and every misstep could leave a position vulnerable. Artillery units, though plentiful, often struggled to coordinate with the forward observers in the dense, snowy terrain. Communication lines, field telephones, and runners were fragile, and the fog of war moved faster than any messenger. The gunner's emplacement, though fortified with sandbags and steel plates, was part of this fragile network. A single breakthrough by the enemy could unravel the careful balance of firepower and position across miles of front. German tactics compounded the threat. Panzer commanders emphasized speed, combined arms, and decisive strikes. Infantry, artillery, and air reconnaissance moved in synchronized support, allowing the tanks to exploit gaps or force defensive units into untenable positions. Engineers cleared obstacles swiftly, while flamethrowers and demolition squads were ready to seize fortified points. For the Allies, understanding this approach meant predicting not only where tanks would appear, but also how they would react to resistance. Even a single successful counterattack could slow a formation long enough for reinforcements to arrive, or fail, leaving destruction in its wake. The gunner's mind weighed these variables. His ammunition was limited, his gun capable of piercing armor only under precise conditions. Each decision, from angle of fire to timing, had to account for the enemy's armor thickness, speed, and formation. Nearby units watched silently, their hope tethered to his actions. Outside the immediate fight, commanders on both sides monitored troop movements, sending coded orders, adjusting strategy, and recording intelligence that would shape future engagements. Every factor converged on this single moment. Terrain, technology, human resolve, and strategy intertwined, setting the stage for an extraordinary tactical gamble that would decide the fate of the German tank column and leave an indelible mark on this frozen morning in northern France. The human perspective of this battlefield is the first lens through which the story of that morning must be understood. The gunner, a young man no older than 24, crouched behind his anti-tank emplacement, feeling the cold bite through wool and steel. Every instinct screamed caution. Every fiber of his body was trained to calculate distance, trajectory, and timing. Around him, soldiers huddled in the snow, faces pale from cold and fear, listening to the distant roar of engines and the occasional clatter of tank treads against frozen earth. In these moments, courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of it, with precision and resolve. Tactical considerations shaped every heartbeat. The narrow corridor formed by trees and craters created a natural funnel, but it also limited maneuverability. The gunner had studied it carefully, understanding that even the most experienced tank crew could be forced into fatal errors if they were guided correctly. His choice of fire lanes, angles, and timing was informed not only by instinct but by hours of reconnaissance and practice. One miscalculation could expose him to return fire, destroy his position, and allow the German column to surge forward unopposed. Technology, meanwhile, dictated the possibilities. The gunner's anti-tank weapon, a 37mm Pak-36, was considered obsolete against heavy Panzer IV armor but remained effective against flank shots or lightly armored vehicles. Shells were scarce, and precision mattered more than volume. The Germans, for their part, relied on armored engineering innovations, reinforced turrets, and coordinated formations that minimized vulnerability. The battlefield had become a test of ingenuity and nerve, where human perception had to compensate for technological gaps. In this delicate balance of fear, strategy, and engineering, the gunner prepared to make a decision that would ripple far beyond his frozen position, igniting events that no single human could fully control, but one that only a single decisive action could set in motion. Leadership on the battlefield is often measured in grand strategy, but here it came down to the split-second decisions of one gunner. He weighed every option: hold fire to conserve ammunition, or strike immediately to exploit a fleeting vulnerability in the German formation. His training, experience, and instinct converged in this instant. Nearby officers had given broad orders, but the reality of armored warfare demanded improvisation. Leadership in this sense was less about issuing commands and more about taking responsibility for outcomes that could decide life and death for hundreds. From the enemy's perspective, the German panzer crews moved with confidence born of doctrine and prior victories. Tactics emphasized momentum. Once a gap was found, it would be exploited ruthlessly. Every maneuver relied on coordination with infantry and artillery, yet even the most disciplined formation could be disrupted by the unforeseen: a well-placed shot, a sudden obstacle, or an environmental trap. The gunner's position represented that unknown, a potential turning point the enemy could neither anticipate nor easily counter. The moral and psychological dimension shaped every heartbeat on both sides. For the gunner and his comrades, the knowledge that failure could mean annihilation heightened focus and fear simultaneously. For the Germans, the expectation of unimpeded progress created confidence, yet any sudden loss would trigger confusion, hesitation, and panic. Human resilience, judgment under pressure, and the instinct for survival became as decisive as guns and armor. In these overlapping perspectives, leadership, enemy awareness, and the psychological weight of battle, the stage was set for a moment of extraordinary consequence. One calculated action would collide with the momentum of war, igniting a chain reaction that neither side could fully control and changing the course of the engagement in ways that would be remembered far beyond this frozen morning. By mid-morning, the German tank column had advanced within striking distance of the gunner's emplacement. The lead Panzer IV, its turret glinting under the pale winter sun, rolled over a frost-hardened rut, slightly exposing its weaker side armor. The gunner's heart raced, breath visible in the freezing air, every muscle tensed as he adjusted the elevation and traverse of his 37mm Pak-36. He waited for the perfect alignment, not a moment too soon, not a second too late. Nearby soldiers held their positions in tense silence, aware that the decision of one man could dictate the fate of the entire formation. He fired. The shell struck the side of the lead tank, igniting a small fire that quickly spread to its fuel lines. Smoke curled into the gray sky, and the sound of metal twisting under heat echoed across the field. The effect was instantaneous. The following tanks, packed tightly in formation, were forced into abrupt maneuvers. One treads over a shallow crater, causing it to skid into its companion. Fuel leaks caught flames from stray sparks, and within minutes the column had erupted into chaos. The roar of engines became punctuated by sudden detonations, metal shredding, and cries of men caught off guard. The gunner, cold and focused, continued to engage with calculated precision. Each shot targeted the most vulnerable tanks, exploiting gaps created by confusion. The German crews scrambled to respond, but coordination faltered under the unexpected inferno. In a matter of minutes, what had been a disciplined, confident, armored advance transformed into a tangled, flaming horde of steel and smoke. Allies watching from concealed positions whispered in disbelief, witnessing the dramatic reversal of fortune. The frozen morning had become a scene of fire and chaos, a testament to how a single, well-aimed strike could disrupt a formidable force. Yet the battle was far from over, and the consequences of this ignition were only beginning to unfold. The chaos escalated as the German formation struggled to regain order. Tanks collided, engines stalled, and crews abandoned burning vehicles. The gunner, sensing the critical moment, shifted focus to the stragglers attempting to flank his position. Each precise shot found its mark, igniting fuel lines and setting steel ablaze. The once confident Panzer column had become a labyrinth of fire, smoke, and shattered metal. The air filled with acrid fumes, punctuated by the deafening cracks of armor rupturing. Nearby infantry, witnessing the unexpected devastation, surged forward to secure flanks and prevent regrouping. German commanders attempted to rally their men, but visibility was near zero and coordination had disintegrated. Radio calls went unanswered, and panic replaced doctrine. Within a span of 20 minutes, the gunners' actions had turned an unstoppable advance into a disorganized retreat, leaving dozens of destroyed tanks scattered across the frozen terrain. The psychological impact was immediate. Allied soldiers, inspired by the audacity and skill of a single gunner, felt their fear transform into determination. German crews, once confident in their technological superiority, now faced the bitter realization that careful strategy could collapse under unexpected resistance. Witnesses later described the scene as surreal, tanks burning like torches in the winter landscape, smoke curling into the overcast sky, and the eerie silence of moments between detonations. By the end of the engagement, the battlefield bore the marks of sudden, decisive action. The German advance had been halted, and the frozen fields were littered with the remnants of mechanized warfare. The moment of ignition had shifted the tactical balance entirely, demonstrating that precision, courage, and opportunistic thinking could dictate the fate of hundreds of men and machines in a single critical morning. In the hours following the engagement, the battlefield became a grim tableau of destruction and survival. Dozens of German tanks lay in twisted heaps, their fuel-fed fires still smoldering in patches of frozen earth. The roar of engines and metal clashes had faded, replaced by the crackle of flames and distant calls of Allied troops moving to secure the area. Reports later filed by Allied officers detailed the extent of the losses. At least 15 tanks destroyed outright, with several more disabled and abandoned. The narrow corridor, once a potential route for a decisive German breakthrough, had become a line of impassable wreckage. For the gunner, the aftermath was a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. His hands, raw from operating the gun in freezing conditions, trembled not from cold alone but from the weight of responsibility. Nearby soldiers worked quickly to extinguish smaller fires and tend to the wounded, their faces lined with relief and awe. Commanders recorded every detail, noting how a single position, expertly defended, had transformed the tactical landscape. Intelligence reports highlighted the lesson. Even heavily armored formations were vulnerable if their momentum could be disrupted, and a precise strike at the right moment could amplify chaos far beyond the immediate area of effect. For the German forces, the retreat was bitter and chaotic. Commanders struggled to reorganize surviving units, and morale sank as news of the losses spread. Soldiers recounted the confusion, the sudden inferno of their own tanks, and the disorienting impact of unexpected resistance. Back at headquarters, dispatches emphasized caution in future armored advances, highlighting the dangers of narrow choke points and over-reliance on mechanized momentum. The battlefield had demonstrated with brutal clarity the interplay of human skill, terrain, and technology, and how quickly advantage could shift when one element faltered. The field remained frozen and scarred, a silent witness to the consequences of a single, well-calculated action. Yet the larger ramifications of the engagement were only beginning to unfold, echoing in reports, strategy meetings, and the minds of soldiers on both sides. This leads naturally into Aftermath, Section 2, which will explore the broader strategic, psychological, and operational consequences. In the days that followed, the wider impact of the gunners' decisive action became evident. The German army was forced to reroute armored divisions, delaying operations along the northern sector by nearly a week. Commanders revised tactical doctrines, emphasizing dispersed formations and greater reconnaissance to avoid repeat disasters. Intelligence reports circulated among Allied headquarters, praising the effectiveness of well-placed defensive positions and highlighting the human element as equally crucial to mechanized might. The engagement quickly became a case study in battlefield improvisation and the exploitation of vulnerabilities taught to officers and soldiers alike. Morale among Allied troops received an unexpected boost. Soldiers who had previously faced armored columns with dread now understood that skill and careful observation could level the playing field against seemingly unstoppable machines. For the gunner himself, recognition came quietly. Commendations filed in official records, personal letters of gratitude from commanding officers, and the knowledge that his actions had saved hundreds of lives. The battlefield, frozen and scarred, remained a testament to the power of initiative, courage, and precision in warfare. For the Germans, the psychological blow was profound. Crews had witnessed firsthand how coordination could collapse under a sudden and unforeseen threat. Even seasoned commanders admitted in post-battle reports that the loss of momentum and the destruction of valuable armored assets required immediate reevaluation of tactics. This event reinforced a lesson that would resonate across the front. Technology alone did not guarantee victory. Human ingenuity and adaptability could rewrite the outcome of even the most disciplined operation. The frozen field, once a simple corridor for mechanized advance, had become a monument to the interplay of strategy, technology, and human resolve. It left an indelible mark on both sides, shaping not only immediate operations but the evolving understanding of armored warfare and defensive tactics. The moment of ignition had sparked consequences that extended far beyond its physical impact, echoing in the planning rooms, diaries, and memories of all who witnessed it. Looking back on that frozen morning, the significance of a single action becomes clear. One gunner, faced with overwhelming odds, transformed fear into focus and hesitation into decisive movement. His precise strikes did more than destroy tanks. They disrupted a formation, altered strategy, and shaped the morale of two armies. In the vast machinery of World War II, moments like these remind us that history is not only made by generals or grand plans, but by individuals who act with courage and clarity under pressure. The battlefield itself tells the story. Burned-out steel and blackened craters mark where technology met human judgment. Smoke and fire carried lessons about vulnerability, timing, and the chain reactions that small decisions can set off. The German army learned painfully that mechanized might could be undone by insight and daring. The Allies learned that courage, combined with knowledge of terrain and equipment, could produce results far exceeding expectations. Ultimately, this event is a testament to the fragile interplay between human skill and technology in warfare. It is a story of strategy, risk, and resilience, of how one person's awareness and resolve can ripple across the battlefield, altering outcomes and inspiring those who witness it. On that winter morning, amid cold, smoke, and steel, history was forged, not by numbers but by a single spark igniting both metal and memory.